Hello, ladies and gentlemen, we got the banners for the anniversary. Woohoo! So let's talk about how good these characters are, how they might be good or bad for your account, and some general advice on how to invest further if you already have them. I will split these into Phase 1 and Phase 2, with Phase 2 coming out later in my channel, and each character is split according to their 3 endgame performances and anomaly arbitration. I know that some people don't and really shouldn't care about anomaly arbitration, so you can skip those parts of the video if you really don't want to hear me talk about it. Anyway, let's get to it, right? The first unit is Silverwolf 999. Silverwolf is receiving the game's glaze unlike any other character in the game. Wolfie is an elation DPS that scales off only her speed stat and has an energy system that relies on punchline generation. So you already know where this is going. Silverwolf is a mono elation unit. If you're not running 3 elation units with her, she is significantly worse and feels very bad to play. Her current best in slot team is Sparksy and Yao Guang, but EMC is not that far behind Sparksy at lower investment, that you can cut your budget to go more into Wolfie Eidolons before Sparksy if you really want to main Silverwolf. Yao Guang is the most important part of Silverwolf's team, and this is where the problem lies. The closest alternative to Yao Guang is quite literally either Sparkle or Asta. Since Wolfie only converts speed to elation, Asta is actually not that bad of a unit, but you can imagine that Silverwolf might have to do a bit of extra pulling to carry these teams without Yao Guang. Is Silverwolf bricked using these characters? No. It still works, especially with Eidolons, but you're gonna have to pull Yao Guang someday with the way Silverwolf's damage is going. Because Silverwolf is part of the flagship team, I don't really need to split up her performance in the 3 endgame modes and anomaly arbitration, since she does really well at both. In the 3 endgame modes, Silverwolf clears PF really easily due to her high amounts of AoE and speed. In Memories of Chaos, she has bounce and AoE to deal with all target counts, and her only real problem in Apocalyptic Shadow is weakness matchups to Shred Toughness, which can be mitigated by the base Silverwolf, who's a 50-50 loss now. But of course, weakness type issues is not exclusive to her, especially in Apocalyptic Shadow, so it oftentimes doesn't matter. In terms of higher difficulty like Anomaly Arbitration, you know the score already. Not only is the raw damage of Mono Elation itself really high, but the enemies actively become neutered in offense and defense if you use Elation on them. Thus, Mono Elation becomes one of the fastest low-cost teams, and Silverwolf is the current best carry for the entire archetype. Of course, this amount of shilling is mostly to cover up Mono Elation lack of a real premium sustain to make them feel better than Mono Remembrance. But it is clear that the lack of a sustain will only be a temporary issue, and at some point this issue will be resolved by a new unit. Plus, it's being compared to the top 1 team in the game regardless, named Mono Elation. Even if they are top 2, it's still very impressive that they are that close to Mono Remembrance. In essence, Silverwolf is one of the best carries in the game, provided you have the entire Mono Elation team that you should have sooner or later to keep Silverwolf viable. As for investment, Silverwolf is pretty straightforward to pull for. The bare minimum recommendation is to get Yao Guang no matter what. You don't need Yao Guang's Eidolons or Sig, though it is nice. You're better off using that on Silverwolf's Eidolons if you really want to main her. Silverwolf's biggest Eidolon jump early on is E2, while her E1 in comparison is just kind of okay. Her Sig is also really important for her. Ideally, you want Silverwolf to be at E0S1 or E2S0. Being stuck at E1S1 is kinda bad, and you should have just focused on E2 instead of Signature. After that, Yao Guang Z1 is pretty good, and then Sparksy would be your last unit to focus on if you want to focus on her at all. You could just make Silverwolf E6 instead of investing more into Sparksy. Pretty simple. Silverwolf isn't like Finon in a sense that pulling E2 Finon means you can run literal garbage with Finon and still probably clear. Silverwolf still wants her premium options, and you're kind of just throwing a band-aid over it that you have to get a real solution for someday. That's all for Silverwolf. Nothing much else really to say. She's part of the flagship. She's the best DPS of the flagship. Her team is a safe pull. Yada yada yada. It shouldn't be, surprising what I say about her. Next are the reruns, and first of all is Dahlia. In my first evaluation, I said Dahlia was outright necessary for any account that wants Break to be usable, and that has only become more intense with time. Dahlia brings the complete package, and with recent matchups and stat inflation, Dahlia becomes more and more necessary for Break as if she already wasn't. To evaluate Dahlia is evaluating the Break archetype itself, and from Dahlia's performance since release, Break is one of the best teams in the game at the moment due to its sheer comfort and logistical advantages. For starters, the Break archetype itself is very isolated. While this could also qualify as a disadvantage, in team-locked content like Anomaly Arbitration, this factor prevents Break from stealing high-value supports that would be required for another team. Like for example, you have Evernight, Anaxa, and Phynon in the same account. Your Cyrene is going to be stretched pretty thin, and one of your teams are inevitably going to be at a damage loss. Dahlia has no issues with this, since she only exists for one team, and her team members itself aren't easy to steal away from Break either. In fact, most of her party members are pretty useless outside of Break anyway. The second advantage that Break has is that it is anti-crit. So far, there hasn't been a single Anomaly Arbitration debuff that outright counters DOT and Break. On the contrary, there's been incredibly tough stages that are against teams that aren't DOT or Break. This provides a pretty significant advantage, since even if the stage isn't anti-crit, there's very few things stopping Break to be usable with enough investment. And if it is anti-crit, you can rest easy with low-cost Break instead of sacrificing a powerful high-cost team just to brute force it. And since I'm talking about Anomaly Arbitration, all of these benefits apply to the other endgame modes much more effectively, with Break, unlike DOT and Elation, having much more stellar Apocalyptic Shadow performances over the two, with decent performance in PF and MOC to boot. Break is just very easy to brute force with compared to many other teams, which is very valuable for a new account with limited rosters trying to dip their toes into endgame. So is Dahlia a must pull? No, she's not for everybody. But is Dahlia worth it if you really want the Break archetype? Yes, she's the key to a very strong archetype much like Kafka. If she's not there, then say goodbye to ever using that one archetype. But again, as a reminder, it's not the only archetype that exists, so don't feel pressured to pull for it if you already have good archetypes in your account. As for investing into Dahlia, investing in Dahlia is a very good idea, since one of her main advantages is giving Break better verticals to raise their ceiling in the future endgame mode. For Firefly specifically, Firefly can dip into her personal eidolons, since they are just as impactful as Dahlia's eidolons, and she could skip out on some Dahlia investment. But if you're intending to run any other Break unit, like main DPS Ling Sha, Himiko, Rappa, Butil, Shui, or whatever, the next big upgrades for these Break carries are always Dahlia investments instead of their own. Dahlia's signature is incredibly strong for Firefly, Butil, and Rappa, units that are usually able to constitute nearly all of the team's DPS. Having this sig that only buffs one unit with effectively true damage per break is as nuts as it sounds. Dahlia's E1 is particularly useful for more balanced damage distributions like Himiko and Ling Sha. Being able to give super break multiplier to everybody in these teams is just one part of it, but being able to drain toughness immediately is very difficult to replace, especially for Himiko's mechanics and boss brute forcing. E2 is also a stellar upgrade for units without spammable implants and rely a lot on it, like Himiko, Ling Sha, and Rappa. Not only does it line up well with AoE matchups these units are amazing for, but 20% reduction is also just really strong for the entire break archetype. Here's the chart that I made to invest in Dahlia since 3.8, and since nothing's changed, I didn't really change it either. She aged way better than expected, which makes sense because look at her. Actually, don't, I'm getting distracted, sorry. Next for the reruns is Castorice. Castorice is the infamous anniversary unit from last year who scales off HP loss and healing. It's well documented how powerful Castorice is, and her utility with global passive, saving many extreme sustainless runs, would not be possible without her. Even if you don't use Castorice, she is an overall net benefit if you are able to use her global passive well, but most people unfortunately really won't, so I wouldn't pull her just for the global passive. Just like Silverwolf, she is a DPS of a very broken team core that allows her to shine as one of the strongest units in the game. And just like Wolfie, castorice feels a lot worse if she's even missing one teammate like the sad wet puppy princess that she is, notably Evernight and Hyacinth. Without these units or just eidolons on castorice to compensate, castorice feels pretty bad even in the lower endgame mode. She should still clear though, like it's not impossible, she just feels very hollow as a unit, much like any other unit since time has caught up quite a bit with her. She plays well with pure fiction due to the enemy attack frequency and not relying on her own turns to activate her damage. She's flexible target count wise due to bounce, and she's very difficult to kill with Hyacinth. As for her power level in Anomaly Arbitration, finally, I'm actually splitting this up for a good reason. While castorice at E0 is fine for the other 3 endgame modes, in my experience, castorice at Anomaly Arbitration without eidolons is having a bit of trouble trying to catch up. Testing her out in night stages compared to Evernight both at E0 has shown a clear difference of where the power budget in Mono-Rem truly lies, that being Hyacinth and Evernight, with Cyrene being a mediator and castorice not being truly necessary to the archetype. It's not impossible to full star knights with E0 castorice, mind you, just a lot more difficult than what most people would assume. Thankfully, castorice does have good eidolons, but it's not always the right move. For one, while castorice's eidolons are good, Evernights are just that much stronger, and Hyacinth is much more versatile and better at lower cost. So if you were going to make cast stronger, Evernight's E1 might be better than whatever cast can pull for. But there is one thing about Mono-Rem that most archetypes cannot do. It's the fact that they can mitosis very successfully and Anomaly Arbitration. For example, instead of side 1 having both E2 castorice and E2 Evernight, why not just split them into 2 comps and split Cyrene and Hyacinth evenly to match the power level needed? Mono-Rem is strong enough that with enough investment, they can break apart and become lower cost teams than the sum of their parts. This is really only reliable if your castorice and Evernight both have eidolons, with E2 Evernight and E2 castorice being able to split Cyrene, RMC, and Hyacinth apart pretty effectively and still perform a full star night stage clear. So while castorice for the singular Mono-Rem team isn't necessary, splitting up the team does require castorice with eidolons to be very effective. And if that's not enough, the king stage will melt under the presence of both E2 invested cast and E9 together, solving both your knight and king issues at the same time. This is backed up with many upsides in the archetype itself, like being very difficult to kill, countering interference, which is a very annoying Anomaly Arbitration debuff with Cass's energy system, and generally just being flexible in target counts with Cyrene. So it's not a completely bad idea to pull for castorice's eidolons, it's just that you might have to invest in Evernight first and Hyacinth before you get to it. And it is overall a very effective strategy in Anomaly Arbitration that it really isn't a waste. Again, castorice at E0 is really the only problem here. Once she has more eidolons, her issues are kinda solved. As for investment, castorice is a unit that first off wants a complete team. Hyacinth is the most important, then Evernight, then Cyrene. Once the E0 base is complete, pull for castorice and Hyacinth's signature, though you can also pull for Hyacinth's E1 in place of her signature, but ideally you want both. The next E1 would usually be Evernight. Even with focusing on trying to buff castorice, Evernight's E1 is just the best option for any remembrance team. After that, you can go straight to castorice's E2, but if you want to try splitting Rem, Evernight's E2 should also be a priority somewhere down the line to offset reliance on Mono-Rem. Castorice should be okay as a hyper carry with just E1, but in Anomaly Arbitration she will have to steal Hyacinth since she's a weaker unit than Evernight at the same cost. That's all for castorice. Castorice is still a good unit, but just like Evernight, if you don't have Hyacinth or Evernight herself already, you're fighting an uphill battle trying to backpull a meta team. In HSR, you always are in a disadvantage trying to pull for reruns, but if you were gonna pull anything on a rerun, Mono-Rem is like your best choice by far. The last unit is Firefly. Just like Dahlia, Firefly will be judged on the basis of how good Break itself is as an archetype, because after Nova Flare, Firefly is very ahead of pretty much every other break DPS, barring Himiko in Pure Fiction. Firefly's notable upsides being that she is a constant stream of damage unlike Bootil, being able to implant easily unlike Rappa, and having a great E2 to raise her ceiling. Firefly is noticeably much tankier, which makes sustainless runs much easier with her than any other break DPS that isn't named Lingshaw. She simply has the highest amount of benefits compared to every other break carry, that if you are starting to build break from scratch, there's very few reasons why you should pick any other break DPS except for Firefly. Especially now that enemy HP has risen, where simply running Lingsha as a main DPS can struggle with anomaly arbitration without eidolon. But in the 3 endgame modes, she's very easy for new players looking to dip their toes into Jade rewards. She can brute force many matchups due to her blast damage, she has constant implants for matchup flexibility, and she just has a lot of damage. Dahlia and Firefly as a core is fairly cheap too, with Gallagher, Harmony MC, and Ron May all being very accessible. The only caveat with Firefly is that Nova Flare didn't fix the fact that Firefly is completely bricked without Dahlia. So if you don't have Dahlia, Firefly is worthless, even in lower endgame modes. With that being said, in Anomaly Arbitration, HP inflation does not slow down for Firefly either. I was under the impression that Firefly didn't need a Nova Flare with how she overperformed during 4.0, but after trying out 4.1 and the preview for 4.2 Anomaly Arbitration, it became more clear to me that Firefly's Nova Flare was in fact needed to save her from the difficulty spikes occurring in Anniversary. Thankfully, Firefly's Nova Flare was impactful enough that running E0 Firefly is still able to clear, but her time is ticking to get her E2, and I cannot be sure that she will keep doing Anomaly Arbitration without eidolons on her or Dahlia. So as a word of caution, if you're an Anomaly Arbitration player, if you want Break to survive beyond the 3 endgame modes, you might have to pick up Dahlia or Firefly eidolons to make it past the finish line and get your full star knight. It's pretty worth it though. Break again has many logistical benefits that also extend to Firefly. You can refer to the Dahlia chart again because Firefly is included there in her investment. Again, Firefly needs Dahlia at a bare minimum, then E2 Firefly or E2 Dahlia is equally viable options. E2 Firefly is more isolated, but it is better, whereas E2 Dahlia may be more universal if you don't want to play Firefly all the time, and you want, like, I don't know, your Lingshaw or your Bootil to be good or something. Not much else to say, Firefly is a good unit. That's all for the Phase 1 banners. I planned on making this include Phase 2, but there's so much to say that by the time I scripted Phase 1, Phase 2 can be its own 20-minute video. So I'm saving it for maybe when 4.2 second half drops, because it's a very good discussion point, I think. Maybe I'll indirectly address it in a topic video instead of a banner review. So yeah, wow, a topic video from Wave, it's been like 3 months or whatever. Anyway, that's all. Do the algorithm stuff, join my membership. Thank you to my members, by the way. And I'll see you tomorrow with another video about Huohuo and Robin. Goodbye.